A question I get asked a lot by government contractors is how can I win contracts without past performance or experience? And we've all been there before, right? In government contracting companies, we're in there, but we don't have any past performance or experience really. Or even we've been around for a while, but no past performance. And I'll talk to you the difference between a contract and a past performance. I know they might seem the same, but not quite. One of the things I hate seeing, I think the most, are 8A government contractors who reach the end of the 9-year window and they're graduating out of that program, but they don't really have a body of past performances. They have contracts, sure, but no past performances. Past performances are what the government looks for to give you bigger and bigger contracts. Contracts in general are not enough because in this 8A example, for example, they're spread out, right? And this is a normal challenge for government contractors, not having past performance experience. Even large businesses have this problem when they're going in to new agencies. They don't have experience in there. And so they're still trying to figure out, okay, what's our path in here? How do we begin to build that trust within the government beyond name recognition? So this is a normal challenge for all of us in government contracting. So if you don't have past performance, don't worry about it. No past performance, no problem. We'll take care of that in today's session. I'll give you some really good ideas on how to win contracts with no past performance. It begins with a clear, focused offer. And so that's the first thing I'm going to talk about. The second thing is I just want to make sure you understand what I mean when I say past performance in the federal market. There's ways to looking at it, and I don't like to make assumptions that we're all seeing it the same way. The next thing I want to cover down is kind of the how, right? What's the fastest path to revenue and those past performances? How do you begin to get those past performances? And I'll give you one tip at the end about the value of case studies. It doesn't matter what level of business you're at, you can still have case studies. An employee can have case studies, right? Hey, we worked on this project. So I'll talk about that. We'll drive forward. If you don't know who I am, my name is Neil McDonnell. I want to welcome you to my federal sales training where I provide tips for success in the federal market. I spent 20 years in the federal market as a small business owner. And since 2018, I've been teaching people like you that government contracting is not a secret. It's just a process. When we follow the process A to Z, we're going to have repeatable, predictable results. That's the point of a process. That's the point of the training. It's what I want for you is to have repeatable, predictable success. So when I say have a clear, focused offer, right, this literally means niche down. There's a saying, the riches are in the niches. And what they mean is if you niche down, if you come down and have a focused offer, you're going to achieve the riches. And one of the things I will encourage you to do is to stop saying you sell everything. When I run into companies who are struggling to get traction because they don't have experience in past performance, they often sell everything, right? Stop selling everything. I don't mean to be brutal. What I'm saying is even Booz Allen doesn't sell everything. They're a multi-billion dollar firm, and they have learned they can't sell everything. They've got to narrow it down. So they don't build airplanes, let's say. And so you want to do that same thing. You want to come down and focus your offer instead of saying you sell everything. And I'll use an example in a second. But one of the reasons that we tend to say we sell everything is because we're fearful of FOMO, fear of missing out. What if I say these 3 things or this clear focused offer, but I miss out on this? Well, if you try to chase multiple rabbits, you're going to miss out on dinner, right? So the idea is when you focus, you get known for something, and then you get in the door, then you can sell more stuff. But you won't get in the door unless you focus, because no one is looking to buy everything. They're looking to buy one thing. So you want to sell the one thing you're really good at. Look at what your company does, or if you're brand new, look at what you do. Figure that out and go, this is what I do. Like my last company, it was a Microsoft SharePoint company. It was because I was doing project management, which I also was, but I was a SharePoint expert around that. And that's what I started the company on, saying, I want to be a SharePoint company where we're selling SharePoint solutions in the business side. And so we just kept getting known for SharePoint, but I happen to be really, really good at SharePoint. So that was the one thing I decided to sell. And I said, hey, let's build a company on that. You want to be remembered for one thing. Just like I said, SharePoint, we literally were picking up multi-million-dollar contracts from people who said, oh, you got to go to them. They're the SharePoint guys, right? That's what you want. Somebody to look at your company and go, she's a SharePoint company, whatever your SharePoint version is. But you want to be remembered for that one thing. If you say too many things, it's hard for people to remember, right? I know that Jay Madigan, I think I saw him in the chat as well, right? I know him from water management, even way back when. We do water management. I got it. Water management. When I'm walking somewhere, I might not be able to tell Jay's story, but if somebody says water, I'm going to go ping, oh, water. If they say SharePoint, right, I'm going to look to the SharePoint companies I know. I want to know your one thing. That's why I say in the chat, make sure you put your core competency, put your company name, put that information into the chat so people can learn about you. All right, the example I put down there, I've been using my examples, but here's another one from one of my customers, right? They do software development, but they were trying, when we first started talking, they were saying they do several different things on IT, software development, cyber, blah, blah, blah. But as we had a conversation, we realized, oh, it's software development. Of course, there's cybersecurity in software development. There's data that we reach out to, but it's all around an umbrella offering, focused offering of software development. And they were able to go even narrow to say, well, you know what? It's actually Amazon Web Services, not really every other platform out there. So we're not trying to sell Microsoft and Amazon. So they niched it down to cloud native applications on AWS. That's going to be memorable when they go talk to the people who potentially want to work with them or buy from them. So make sure you have a clear, focused offer when you're thinking about past performance and gaining it. Let's talk about past performance in the federal market. The biggest problem with past performance is not quite understanding the past performance in there. So basically, when you're going after opportunities, you want to have 3 past performances. Any contract you try to go after, typically they ask for 3 past performances. So the first place you can get experience is from anywhere, right? So state, local, commercial, it doesn't matter. That can count as past performance. If you don't have these past performances, you want to get it. And that's what we're going to talk about, is how to go after it. But the first level of past performance is that outside federal agency past performance, right? The second one is past performance in an agency within the federal government. It's not in mine, right? If I got a contract I'm going to do, I'm looking for people who have experience. First, I'll look for them and have it in my agency, and then I'll look at them having it in any agency. And so as you're building it up from outside the federal market to inside the federal market, but not in my agency, to in the federal market and in my agency. For example, if I want to do work with the Navy, it's one thing to have experience with the Army or DHS, but it's another to have experience inside the Navy. Say, hey, I've done contracts in the Navy. And so I want to build up 3 past performances within the Navy, if that's, their agency that we're trying to pursue. So past performances, you're always trying to get them to be more and more relevant to the requirement the government's dropping. The next way to do it, so I said federal agency or my agency, and that was like, with who did you do it? The bottom 2 bullets talk about what did you do. And so often you'll see in contracts, I'm looking for you to have 3 past performances of similar scope, the type of work, right? And this means, for example, it's not enough for you to tell me that you've done web development. If you've done SharePoint development, now that's similar scope. If I don't have anybody else who's done SharePoint, I'll have to look to the people who are not doing SharePoint. But if I've got a SharePoint project, I want to see that you've done SharePoint development in the cloud or something, right? That kind of activity or that kind of work is similar scope. And then the bottom bullet is similar size. So here they're talking about 2 different ways, or I'm talking about 2 different ways that a government might measure your past performance based on the size of the contract you had. Either the dollar size, have you done $5 million contracts, $10 million? I see that sometimes, and I never like that, because it's like, well, I charge them more. Is it really helpful to you? Or I charge them less. Is that helpful to you? What I like is size, saying similar scope and similar size in the user environment. So if I'm doing SharePoint, or if you're doing building construction or whatever, it doesn't matter. Does the work size and the scope, the type of work you're doing, do those align to this new opportunity or this new requirement the government has? If they do, those are 3 really good past performances. So my point about these bullets on this slide of understanding past performances as they go forward is you want to know this and begin to build it up. What I teach people is the first thing you need to do is to just make money in the government. Once you're making money and paying yourself and you can eat, right? Then you begin to shape your past performances so they can start leading you where you want. Don't get contracts in 5, 10 different agencies. Instead, pick a target agency and really try to get subcontracts, contracts, whatever in that agency. So you're building up past performance in CMMS at HHS or in the Navy, right? You want to build past performance so you're getting to the stage of similar type, scope, and size of projects that you want to go after. in the agency you want. If you want to go after the Navy, then I would first be looking at Navy, Air Force, and Army type contracts before I'd ever look at Department of Education. That's not a similar type scope because the users are different, right? And the environment's different. So think about that when you're building your past performances. Build it strategically. Don't just take contracts. Go choose the contracts you want and pursue them. Yes, it's work, but that's sales, right? Last thing on past performances, just keep in mind, the whole reason the government is looking for these type of past performances is because they're trying to reduce their risk. If they're looking for you to have done similar size contracts, it's because they know that this contract, there's billable activity. You might have a team. Do you know, have you managed teams before? There's a huge user base, or it's geographically dispersed, or it's the Navy is one of my favorite, right? Where it's on land and on boats, so afloat and ashore. Those kind of things really matter to the government. And when they find vendors like us who have that past performance, it helps them feel like the risk is being reduced on this work that they need done. And everything is about reducing the risk in order to be able to execute on the mission. And so if you pay attention to that, it will help you create a plan to get the past performances that you need. Okay, so let's talk about the fastest path in my recommendation to getting revenue and past performance or experience, right? So before you can have prime contract past performance, you need to get in the door, you need to get experience of any level. And so sometimes the government will count your subcontracting experience. And this is what I want to recommend to you. The first thing is, if you're here saying, how do I get contracts without having past performance or experience, that means you don't have any past performance or experience to speak of. You might have a couple of contracts, even 5 or 10 million, but it's not focused because you're in 8A and maybe they've given you different contracts, but they're all unrelated. Well, now you're going to be strategically grabbing past performances. It begins with subcontract past performance and it works its way up. So what I'm suggesting here is that you subcontract with other small businesses in 3 different tiers in this order, right? And so let's assume we're talking about SharePoint, right? My last company. What I want to do is to go get SharePoint work, past performance, whatever that is. For me, it could be SharePoint development or migration support on somebody else's prime contract. Some other company, a small business, has the prime contract for a big piece of work. I want to come in and do the SharePoint portion of that work, and that's subcontracting, right? And so the first group of people I want to look to are small businesses doing 3 to 10 million. It's the easiest doors to get in. Literally, what I'm putting here is the how it gets harder and harder. It just requires a lot more in the conversation. But if you find companies doing 3 to 10 million, and you have a clear focused offer and you're calling the company that aligns to what you do, right? I'm not calling a construction company and saying, I do Microsoft SharePoint. That's not an alignment. But if I call a network engineering firm and I say, I do Microsoft SharePoint, or I call a software developer who does AWS and I say, we do SharePoint. If you ever get invited to that, could we be part of that party? Because if they're in there doing software development for Amazon, guaranteed the government is looking to them if they're doing good work and saying, can you also help us on our Microsoft needs, right? And so you want to find these companies doing 3 to 10 million. I have a lot of training on how to do that, et cetera. And then as you move forward, right, you're trying to get, let's say 5 or 10 people. And I know that sounds like a lot if you don't have people, but it really is not. I've laid out how you can go after that and how you start pursuing it. If you just reach out, pick up the phone and call people, you will be able to reach them and you will get yeses or nos. And the faster you get no's, the sooner you'll be at yeses and the sooner you'll start getting experience. So as you have that experience, then you can go to small businesses that are larger. That's what I call mid-tier small businesses. They're 10 to 25 million. They're doing pretty good. They've got a system in place for them to continue to win more and more work. And so they're going after bigger contracts. It allows you to maybe get bigger portions of the work. Maybe there's a piece of work that's a $50 million, $100 million opportunity, but it's like $10 million for the SharePoint work, right? So that's $2 million a year. If it's a 5-year contract, that's a good piece of work. If I can try to land that, well, finding small businesses that are doing 10 and 25 million allows me to start getting invited into these bigger opportunities. Remember, past performance is about similar dollar size and scope. Even though I'm not the prime, I can still at least reference it in one way or another. And we can talk another day about that. But the idea is now the work size is bigger in scope and dollar. And then the last thing is small businesses doing 25 plus million, right? The reason I like these folks is that they're on their path to graduating out of small business to large. Probably when you start looking at them, these are the companies that are lining up, 25 to $100 million at a time opportunities. That's the total contract value of an opportunity they're pursuing. And so these are perfect ones because these companies are thinking about how do we align with a small business and move them forward with us so that when we get to be large, we can still go after small business work together with Neil's company, for example, right? I'll team up with him, he can prime and I'll sub. And so each one of these companies or each one of these groups, as you move forward, you're developing relationships, you're proving yourself not just to the government, but to these companies. And it allows you to begin to identify the right companies that when you're ready to flip over to priming, you've got this subcontracting past performance that allows you to go after this. But if you keep it focused on a clear offer, then you're going to really have past performance that's just one after the other, that's just lined up. If you go into DSBS and look at some of my customers, they'll have 30 or 40 pieces of work that we've encouraged them to put in their experience in past performance section. And it just shows network engineering, network support, network project management, network engineering, like all related if you got that pattern. Okay, so make sure you're subcontracting with small businesses. I know that's the what. So how do you do that? How do you find small businesses? I have many trainings that you can go watch the replay. I've done over 400 trainings in the last 2 years alone, and you can find a lot where I go deeper into this. But let me give you the real quick way to find small businesses, right? The first thing I would do is go into FPDS or USA Spending and find small businesses winning prime contracts. Literally, I think in the last month or two, I've done a couple of these trainings on how to use it. I might even do that this Wednesday. I think I'm doing an FPDS training. But go in and find winning small businesses. You're just filtering down by saying, show me small businesses. Maybe use a couple of keywords and you just export the list and you begin to understand what they do. Take that list of companies that are winning at your target agency or wherever you're targeting and go over to DSBS now. In the dynamic small business search, you're able to find the name, number, and email of almost all the business owners in there. At the very least, you'll find points of contact. So the primary person you can call. So if you go in there, you now have a list of 100 or 200 small businesses that are winning 3 to 10 million, right? I can literally go into FPDS or USA Spending and pull out a list of 100 or 200 people doing stuff in my NAICS code, let's say 541-511. They're doing between 3 and 10 million prime contracting. So that means I don't know what else they're doing. They probably are doing more as a sub and maybe even commercial or something. But 3 to 10 million prime contracting allows me to download that list and then find the owners in DSBS. Is it a little bit of time? Yes. Is it hard? Not really once you follow the process. And again, watch my training. One thing I wanted to just point out, we have a customer who just last week was contacted by a contracting officer, invited in to bid on an opportunity because of DSBS. And I actually got on the phone with that KO and talked to them, and they said literally that they went through keywords. I had to go through 3 keywords before I found a small enough list. And here's the most important part, if that wasn't it. They reached out to all sorts of businesses like my customers. Nobody responded. It's not secret. It's not magic. It's not hacks or tricks. It's about doing the right thing, being visible in DSBS, and then answering the phone when somebody calls. And so for you to find the small businesses, just do the reverse or do something similar to what buyers do when they come to find us. All right, so I'm tracking down on this last slide here, I think. I really wanted to emphasize this idea. There's in sales, we say features tell, stories sell. And so if I use this mouse, I can sit there and talk about, although it's dirty, I can talk about the batteries or how clean it is or the wheel or things like that. Or I can tell a story about how now that I have the mouse, I'm able to do so much more, whatever, right? I didn't make a story up for the mouse. And you want to do this, though, for your business. Case studies are stories. People don't care about the details of a project at the moment. What they care about is a story. Tell me a story about what you did, because then I almost can place myself in your story, especially if we're talking about my need, which is a similar need to something that you have done before. When you start telling that story of how you helped somebody else, I start imagining myself and my agency in that agency's shoes, and I understand the story you're telling. I begin to buy that outcome that you did without ever having bought anything from you yet, right? That's the idea of stories selling. It works for everybody, by the way. It doesn't have to be just like, a company doing 10, 20 million and they've got proven past performances and they can put all this together. even if you're in the beginning, even if you've subcontract, even if you've just started and you don't have any company past performances, you can take your personal experiences, turn them into a case study. You just make sure it's clear that, look, this is some of the leadership projects we have worked on, over the years, whatever. There's ways to say it in the case study, so you just make sure it's clear. But you're not lying to anybody. You're saying, hey, Neil, I have just started a company. It's got no past performance, but I have been doing SharePoint for 20 years or something, right? I've done this. This is what we bring into this company. And so as you start telling those stories, it helps. The framework that I want you to follow, and I think I've done a whole training on this at least in the last 6 months. The framework to follow is situation, approach, and benefit. You want to say, what was the situation when you arrived on scene at this contract, right? What was the driver behind this requirement in the buyer's eyes? Why did they put this requirement out, right? What were they experiencing? Sometimes they say it a little bit in their PWS, et cetera, but often you have to dig into it and go, what they really were experiencing is this. For example, that customer I said, my customer was called by the government, but the government contracting officer who called, their problem was they had these IT projects or products that were enterprise licenses, et cetera, that were expired, not expiring, expired, and they needed somebody to convert it, set it up, and upgrade or something. And so that was their situation. They were out of date. They were out of compliance. If anything happened, they wouldn't be able to get support. So they were at high risk. That's what I mean by saying, what's the driver behind the requirements in the buyer's eyes for the situation? The second part of a case study, and by the way, these are 2-3 lines is sufficient. Don't worry about many pages. We say one slide, 3 or 4 lines, in a slide deck, and you can already see it doesn't take much to get to that stage. But the approach is, well, what did you do when you got awarded the contract? Here's how we handled this challenge that the government was facing. Whatever. They had pains and challenges. They had goals. Here's what we did to address that. Here's how we planned and delivered the solution. It doesn't matter whether you're talking elevator maintenance and construction work or IT and cyber. It's all the same. We have a challenge or a situation, and we had our approach. And the last thing you end with on a case study is, well, what was the benefit to the buyer, to the government? After following our recommended plan and approach, they were able to reduce the time it took to do the job by 30%. We had 5 less elevators dropping from the sky because we maintained it, whatever, right? You want to make sure you put the benefit. What was the outcome? It doesn't have to be a dollar for dollar ROI, but somehow you coming in made everything better. And so you want to be able to put those case studies in place because it enables you to tell a story. And those case studies should be fairly easy to do for you. Don't make them overly complicated. Here's what I want you to remember from today's training session is that the first thing is just make sure you have a clear, focused offer. If you're trying to build past performance, it begins with making it easy for people to know what you sell. The second thing is find small businesses to call using FPDS and DSBS, those 2 tools. When you find them, you've created a target list and move into step 3, which is start making the calls. Reach out to these people one at a time. Don't batch reach out to them. Don't spam them. Reach out to John and to Jane and know who you're reaching out to. Don't do heavy research, but do a quick look at their website or something and say, hey, trying to figure out whether there's a spot for us to fit together. So hopefully this makes sense. If you don't have past performance, you can get it. And you can also win contracts, subcontracts, without past performance. You can certainly win it as a prime, but really you want to follow that path they laid out for you. Just remember as you go forward, government contracting, it's not a secret. It's just a process. I'll see you in the next training.